Finally tonight, as we told you earlier in the show, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO rather, is testifying right now on Capitol Hill. Spent much of the day up there. He'll do it again tomorrow. While much of this testimony was serious, a few lawmakers did have some fun with their questions. And one soundbite machine, in fact, added to the mix. Even got some laughs out of Zuckerberg.
Mr. Zuckerberg, would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
No.
If you've messaged anybody this week, would you share with us the names of the people you've messaged?
Senator, no, I would probably not choose to do that publicly here.
I know up until 2014, the mantra or motto of Facebook was move fast and break things. Is that correct?
I don't know when we changed it, but the mantra is currently move fast with stable infrastructure, which is a much less sexy mantra.
Sounds much more boring.
I say this gently. His user agreement sucks. He can probably spot me 75 IQ points. If I can figure it out, he can. He knows as well as I do, as successful as he is and as smart as he is, that the purpose of that user agreement is to cover Facebook's rear end. Let us take a crack at writing this thing in non-Swahili English.
Senator Kennedy, I mean, we just can't get enough of them. That's it for us. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for the special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The story hosted by Martha MacCallum starts right now. Welcome back, Martha.
Hello there, Brett. Good to see you. Breaking tonight, our guest says that what we are watching today could be the beginning of the end for Facebook, and that the Wild West of social media technology is about to run into a buzzsaw that was set in motion by Congress, and that Congress has long turned a blind eye. Today, Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Durbin cut to the chase on the hot issue of censoring political thought on Facebook, and also how much is too much sharing.
There are a great many Americans who I think are deeply concerned that Facebook and other tech companies are engaged in a pervasive pattern of bias and political censorship. There have been numerous instances with Facebook. In May of 2016, Gizmodo reported that Facebook had purposely and routinely suppressed conservative stories from trending news, including stories about CPAC, including stories about Mitt Romney, including stories about the Lois Lerner IRS scandal, including stories about Glenn Beck. In addition to that, Facebook has initially shut down the Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day page, has blocked a post of a Fox News reporter, has blocked over 24 Catholic pages, and most recently blocked Trump supporters Diamond and Silk's page with 1.2 million Facebook followers after determining their content and brand were, quote, unsafe to the community. To a great many Americans, that appears to be a pervasive pattern of political bias. Do you agree with that assessment?
Senator, let me say a few things about this. First, I understand where that concern is coming from because Facebook and the tech industry are located in Silicon Valley, which is an extremely left-leaning place. And this is actually a concern that I have and that I try to root out in the company, is making sure that we don't have any bias in the work that we do. And I think it is a fair concern that that people would at least wonder about.
Let me ask this question. Are you aware of any ad or page that has been taken down from Planned Parenthood?
Senator, I'm not, but let me just...
How about MoveOn.org?
Sorry?
How about MoveOn.org?
I'm not specifically aware of those.
How about any Democratic candidate for office?
I'm not specifically aware. I mean, I'm not sure.
Would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
No.
If you've messaged anybody this week, would you share with us the names of the people you've messaged?
Senator, no, I would probably not choose to do that publicly here.
I think that might be what this is all about. Your right to privacy, the limits of your right to privacy, and how much you give away in modern America in the name of, quote, connecting people around the world. The question basically of what information Facebook's collecting, who they're sending it to, and whether they ever asked me in advance my permission to do that. Is that a fair thing for a user of Facebook to expect?
Yes, Senator. I think everyone should have control over how their information is used.
Wow, and it is still going on tonight. Leading that hearing today, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley. He will join us in just a moment. Also doing the questioning, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, and David Kirkpatrick, who literally wrote the book on the Facebook effect. He has been studying this for over a decade. We begin tonight with the Senate Judiciary Chairman, Chuck Grassley. Senator, good to have you here tonight. Tell me, what really stood out to you today? What was accomplished today, do you think, in this hearing?
Well, I wouldn't say this is accomplishment, what's been accomplished, but I would say that it is pretty clear that Facebook does not have any sort of record or total amount of information that's been transferred. They don't seem to have an audit of what's going on, or at least it hasn't been audited to this point, and they don't know how much of that information has been shared with third parties, and then the third parties, what they have done with it. And it seems to me that this is pretty essential for not only Facebook, but other platforms to get this under control in order to establish reduce the skepticism and cynicism people have about these platforms and the privacy, and for the protection of privacy.
But I mean, there's some discussion that Facebook knows that some regulation is obviously coming for them, and that it's probably long overdue, that they're already trying to figure out ways to work around it. I mean, are you concerned, I guess, that their ability to continue to collect data will outpace the Congress's ability to do anything about it?
There's some legislation in on this, and I would never try to tell you or anybody else that passing a bill is going to solve all the problems you want to or give the proper protection of the people. And so there's two things to go in different directions. One is this organization can do the things that they need to do to police it properly and make sure people's privacy is protected. And of course, people are cynical about whether any corporation would do that, but it's possible. And the other one would be whatever laws or regulations we can pass. But we know FTC has operated in this area of regulation and agreement with them back in, I think, 2011 or 2012, and they didn't even follow that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the FTC shouldn't they have been protecting America's privacy? I mean, I think that's their motto. What were they doing about this for the last 10 years?
Well, that's something we haven't had an oversight hearing on yet, and that may be more in the jurisdiction of the Commerce Committee under Thune than it is under me, but it's something I'm very interested in because you make laws, and one of the things that we have in the legislative branch of government is oversight, constitutional oversight, to make sure that the laws are carried out the way Congress intended them.
Yeah. All right, Chairman Chuck Grassley, great to see you tonight. Thank you very much. I know you have to get back in there. Thanks for making time for us tonight.
Thank you.
Joining me now, Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons, Senate Judiciary Committee member, who also got to question Mark Zuckerberg tonight. Good to have you with us, Senator Coons. I want to play this soundbite for you on competition, because this is another area that Congress perhaps could have some impact on Facebook and social media. Here's Lindsey Graham.
Is it an alternative to Facebook in the private sector?
Yes, Senator. The average American uses 8 different apps to communicate with their friends and stay in touch with people, ranging from texting apps to email.
The same service you provide.
Well, we provide a number of different services.
Is Twitter the same as what you do?
It overlaps with a portion of what we do.
You don't think you have a monopoly?
It certainly doesn't feel like that to me.
Okay.
Interesting answer from Mark Zuckerberg. Your take on that, Senator? What can you take away from today, and what can be accomplished?
Well, today was, I hope, the first of several hearings where we can make sure that average Americans understand the ways in which their personally identifying data is being collected and gathered, monetized, and used, because Americans should know how their data is being used, and it should be used with their knowledge and with their consent. One of the ways in which I think Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg is getting into some trouble here is practices which, when caught or when brought to light, Mark Zuckerberg apologizes for, promises they will make their best efforts to address, but then several years later have not yet been resolved. One of the things I questioned today was a way that ad targeting on Facebook makes it possible to be racially exclusionary in how you put out ads about housing availability. One of the other issues that I asked of Mr. Zuckerberg was, you make your money by targeting advertising.
Right.
Would you allow a diet pill manufacturer to use your data to target teens anxious about their weight?
Well, you know,
or to allow a casino to target those with gambling problems?
Understood.
I think these are questions worth exploring.
Here's Ben Sass and Mark Zuckerberg on a broader issue that relates in some ways to that. Watch.
Can you imagine a world where you might decide that pro-lifers are prohibited from speaking about their abortion views on your content, on your platform?
I certainly would not want that to be the case.
But it might really be unsettling to people who've had an abortion to have an open debate about that, wouldn't it?
It might be, but I don't think that that would fit any of the definitions of what we have.
So, Senator, at one point, Mark Zuckerberg said they're going to use AI, artificial intelligence, to govern and scan for hate speech. Does that concern you? I mean, could that get into some pretty tricky territory here?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons we're going to need to have a robust and open debate about what kind of tools and what kind of standards Facebook is going to apply. I applaud the fact that Facebook has been very active in identifying and taking down materials that are posted on Facebook by jihadist groups that are advocating terrorism or violence. But one person's hate speech in the context that Senator Sass was just talking about is another person's firmly held political or personal or religious belief. And we need to make sure, first, that we don't infringe on free speech rights, and second, that we don't so over-regulate social media that we restrict it or constrain it, because it is exactly the free and open environment we provide here in the United States that has led to such innovations as the creation of most of the big tech leaders in the world.
Yeah. And Ted Cruz pointed out some pretty interesting examples of things that had been combed out of Facebook for just those reasons, and most of them, you know, had to do with conservative political thought. So we'll see. Senator, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
So when we come back, the man who literally wrote the book on the Facebook effect, David Kirkpatrick, takes us behind the scenes of the social media empire and what he thinks really happened in there today.
Let's start with the user agreement. Here's what everybody's been trying to tell you today, and I say this gently. Your user agreement sucks.
Breaking tonight as this continues to unfold on Capitol Hill, Mark Zuckerberg saying that artificial intelligence is going to lead the way to determine what you can and cannot see on Facebook. So imagine wrapping your head around that technology when Congress is still trying to wrap their arms around what's been going on for the past decade. So that led to a few uncomfortable moments when it came to Facebook's functionality and how exactly all this works. Watch.
How do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
I see.
So do you don't have bundled permissions for how I can agree to what devices I may use that you may have contact with? Do you bundle that permission?
How many data categories do you store, does Facebook store, on the categories that you collect?
Senator, can you clarify what you mean?
How many does Facebook store out of that? Do you store any?
Senator, I'm not actually sure what that is referring to.
For some uncomfortable moments out there today. Let's bring in somebody who wrote a book on the subject here, David Kirkpatrick, author of The Facebook Effect. David, good to have you with us today.
Really good to be here.
You know, there at times, and it's not surprising, I mean, if I were sitting there questioning him, I'd probably have a hard time with some of the technology involved as well, but it looked like they were all talking right past each other. Did you think that?
Well, I think some of them more than others. I mean, a lot of the technologies at play and tools and product designs are quite complicated, especially for interactions that were 4 minutes each with each senator. So I think, frankly, our Senate in general, like all of our legislators, is generally not technologically literate enough. But I think this was a little bit more of a show trial than anything, and I don't really blame them for their questions. I think he did a pretty good job answering on balance.
In terms of, you have said that you think that Facebook could signal the end of global democracy as we know it, and that these hearings are the beginning of a real sea change in the relationship between the government and technology. Explain.
Well, that's not exactly what I believe. I believe that there's a threat to democracy if these systems are not properly overseen and regulated. I mean, and that's been proven in many, many countries where Facebook has been egregiously manipulated by people who were using it illegally or dishonestly, and Facebook has not properly regulated that. So there is a threat. Is democracy at risk right now? No, I don't think so. Although in countries like, for example, Myanmar, where democracy is very shaky to begin with, Facebook has had a very, very dangerous effect. The main point is this is a global company operating in 190 countries. In every single one, politics happens on its service, and we're relying on this commercial company to effectively regulate the public square, including politics. That's just wrong.
In terms of how it changes, you know, in terms of the regulation and what the impact is on social media, because once you open this can of worms, and maybe it should have been opened a long time ago, it's going to change these companies and the future of them.
Well, I think that's healthy, and one of the things I was quite impressed by and even a little surprised by with Zuckerberg today, and I do know him fairly well, is he was really showing a tremendous openness to regulation. At one point he said, promised one senator he would submit a list of regulations that he thought should apply to Facebook. He at another point said that he thought the European approach had some merits, and that's a big concession that you never hear from American tech CEOs. So he was taking major steps in the direction of saying...
But he knows he's going to get regulation. I mean, so this was his moment to try to craft that conversation a little bit.
I agree. I think that's fair. My own opinion is all of those things, you know, privacy regulations definitely going to come out of this. That's a healthy thing. But the real issue is bigger. It's how does society at a global level deal with a global company that has all this power and has up to now been completely unregulated, but even with the privacy laws here and there, is not going to really change the macro relationship. We need a system that gives them more consultancy, more interaction. Otherwise, I don't think Facebook is stable for the society.
David Kirkpatrick, good to see you tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next.
He'll pay a price. Everybody's going to pay a price. He will. Everybody will.
Tough talk from President Trump aimed at Bashar Assad in Syria and his ally Vladimir Putin. Is the United States about to unleash retribution as early as tonight? Ed Henry, Marie Harf, and General Jack Keane with analysis as the president warns strongmen in Syria and Russia. Next.
We cannot tolerate with a war criminal. We cannot tolerate with someone who killed more than 500,000 of his own people. And this matter should end immediately.
So we could get an announcement really at any moment from the president regarding U.S. military action in Syria in response to the weekend's horrific suspected chemical attack. The president canceled his trip to South America so that he could remain at the White House as all of this develops. This is not sitting well with Russia tonight, now threatening, quote, grave repercussions if the United States takes action against Syria's Bashar al-Assad. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins me now live from the White House as we wait. Ed.
Martha, good to see you there, keeping their cards very close to the vest here. Remember, dating back to the campaign, President Trump vowed that he was going to change the practice of tipping off any kind of U.S. military action, any kind of troop movements. But tonight, they are sending strong signals that he is inching towards military action. Today, the president spoke by phone with a key ally, British Prime Minister Theresa May, sent strong hints of action coming by the fact that White House officials said both leaders condemned what they called Syrian President Assad's, quote, vicious disregard for human life. The president and prime minister agreed not to allow the use of chemical weapons to continue. More tea leaves to read into that trip that you mentioned that was canceled. Vice President Mike Pence is now being sent to Peru for the Summit of Americas this weekend because the president has canceled his planned trip to Peru and Colombia. Likewise, the Defense Secretary, James Mattis, has now pulled out of a weekend trip to Nevada and California. He has publicly said the U.S. is not ruling out military action. Pentagon officials, meanwhile, are calling out the Russian military for jamming some U.S. drones flying near Syria. The Pentagon says they are using sufficient countermeasures to protect our manned and unmanned aircraft as those drones scout out possible U.S. strikes against the Assad regime. Listen.
President's been clear we're working with our partners and allies and our national security team to look at all options. And as we've said, all options are on the table, but I'm not going to get ahead of anything the president may or may not do in response to what's taking place in Syria.
The response has to have a military component against Bashar al-Assad, but it also has to send a message to his enablers. Syria is enabled by Iran and Russia.
And tomorrow, the USS Harry Truman is headed to the Mediterranean on a pre-scheduled deployment, but that will now put at least 7 warships with hundreds of cruise missiles in the region. Remember, last year, the U.S. Navy launched 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Syria after another chemical weapons attack. That shows that right now, there is even more firepower in the region, Mark.
Ed, thank you very much. So we know of at least 3 suspected chemical attacks in Syria this year alone, and scores of others in the past few years, prompting a lot of questions about what the Obama administration did and did not do to stop the Assad regime. Remember, they insisted that Syria did not have any more chemical weapons. Watch.
The Secretary released a statement on the remaining removal of chemical weapons from Syria. All of the declared chemical weapons now are out of Syria.
And that would have been good news. It has turned out to not be the case. Marie Harf joins me now. She's former State Department spokesperson. You saw her there back then, and now a Fox News analyst. So, Marie, you know, when you watch what has happened over the last several years, your thoughts on the assumption at that point that those chemical weapons have been cleared out of Syria?
Well, looking at that clip you just played, there was one word that was very key there, and it's the word declared. The 1,300 metric tons of chemical weapons that the Syrian government declared were removed. And I would note that's more chemical weapons than we went to war over in Iraq. Those are weapons that if we hadn't gotten them out of the country, very likely would have fallen into the hands of ISIS. But, and I say this honestly and openly, clearly the Assad regime either kept some weapons and they didn't declare them, or they kept the ability to produce more. So clearly not everything was out, and now we're facing a situation where, because of that 2013 agreement, we were able to get a huge portion of the weapons out, but not all of them. And President Trump has a very serious decision to make in the next coming days.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember the red line, and President Obama clearly stating that if that red line was crossed and he saw, as he put it, I believe, a bunch of chemical weapons moving around, they would take action. But then the action that you discussed at the podium there was the substitute for actual military action, the belief that those chemical weapons had been cleared out. I mean, you know, obviously, you always have to assume that someone like Assad is not necessarily going to declare everything that he has, and that leaving him in power, President Obama said time and time again, he must go. Hillary Clinton said he must go. So trusting his word that you got them all may have been a mistake.
Well, it wasn't trust. I mean, we did destroy, again, 1,300 tons of chemical weapons is no small feat, particularly in the middle of an ongoing war. That is true. But I think what we've seen from military action, and look, I supported President Trump last year when he took that military action after the last attack. That also didn't stop President Assad from continuing to use the chemical weapons he had left. So there are no good answers here. I wish there were. These are all tough choices. We took the choice of getting out a huge amount of chemical weapons, particularly because a number of Republicans in Congress would not give President Obama the authority to strike militarily. We asked them and they said no. Now they're singing a different tune. But again, if taking military action stopped the use of chemical weapons, this latest attack wouldn't have happened. So President Trump has put down a lot of rhetoric, which I think is appropriate. Now it's a question of what will he do. And military action, which I think is appropriate, has to be matched with an ongoing diplomatic, strategic plan to address this and not pull out before we're ready in Syria, because the Russians and the Iranians will fill that vacuum and it will get even worse, Martha.
Understood. Marie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here now, General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. It has been said, General, 24 to 48 hours, we're likely to see some action. The president says he doesn't like to telegraph exactly when that will be. What do you expect?
Yeah, well, certainly I think that's probably likely. It's a question of moving the assets into place and getting it all ready to go. Look at what happened a year ago. We had a measured, proportionate response, took down the airfield and the equipment on it that had delivered the strike. The intent was to deter Assad. That didn't work. It failed, actually. He's used chemical weapons again. So what we shouldn't do is another measured, proportionate response yet larger, because that won't deter him. This guy has made up his mind. He's going to use chemical weapons for military purposes, which gets the desired effect he wants. What we have to do is stop the use of chemical weapons. And by that I mean we have to destroy all his capabilities that deliver those weapons. So we're talking about rotary and fixed-wing aircraft. We're talking about airfields, aviation fuel at those airfields, aviation maintenance, aviation munitions. If he still has artillery-delivered chemical weapons, which he used to have, and some people think he does, our intel guys probably know for sure, then we should take down his artillery as well. We have a complication. The Russians have strategically placed technicians at all of these airfields with the thought that that would discourage the United States from conducting another attack on these airfields. They did it after the last attack a year ago. If we haven't told the Russians already, we should tell them something like this. Every single military base that Syria owns in Syria is vulnerable to a potential attack.
So get out.
And we're giving you plenty of time.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to be responsible for what happens to your people if you don't safeguard them. So yes, an attack is imminent. The other thing is, listen, Iran, Russia, and Syria, they're pariahs in the international community. We have got to go after them in a very public way, condemnation, sanctions, and drag them in to the International Criminal Court. I mean, it will make no difference to Assad and no difference to the Iranians, but it will make a difference to Putin. His public image is very important to him, particularly at home. We got to really go after these guys in a public way.
The president, last time he approved airstrikes to punish Syria, he received a lot of support from the American people on that. 67% approving that move. And we all remember the dramatic video that followed of what happened in terms of the Tomahawk missiles that were sent in. The feeling now, if I have it correctly, is that this would be a much larger operation. Do you agree? And of course, then the question becomes, what happens the next day and the week after that?
Well, first of all, I think it should be. Now, I'm sure there are those, like the last time, there were many who wanted to take down all the airfields the last time a year ago, which I think was much more appropriate, and people pushed back on that. So I don't know what decisions the president has made, but yes, it would be a larger scale operation. We would be using standoff cruise missiles and other bombs from surface, subsurface ships, also from airplanes. If we want to take the airfields out, we'd probably run in our stealth bombers to do that, because cruise missiles aren't good in taking out airfields. Yes, a larger mission to be sure. I think what's coming out of the mouth of the Iranians and the Russians is pure bluster.
Well, they're all saying that they had nothing to do with it. Russia and Assad say these were not their chemical weapons. We have the video, and I know you say that we have very good tracking of the delivery systems for these, and we know exactly where they're coming from. You know, your response to those who suggest that perhaps this isn't what it looks like?
That's rubbish. And it's ignorance speaking. We track every single aircraft that takes off from any airfield in Syria. We track where it goes. We track it when it's executing its bombing run. We know what airplane that is. We have eyewitness accounts of that airplane dropping bombs on a building where chemical weapons impacted the people. Those are verifiable things. And then we do data analysis of the horrible photos we've seen, match up the symptoms of those people with people who have had that in the past. Our intelligence agencies on Monday verified that Assad has used, from helicopter attack again, a nerve agent, and also chlorine gas.
General Jack Keane, thank you. Always good to see you,
Good talking to you.
You too. So still ahead tonight, how China is signaling that it may wave the white flag, at least to some extent, when it comes to these tariffs. Fascinating shifting of the plates in this issue. What does it really mean here? Also, the president's longtime lawyer now reportedly under investigation for the $130,000 payment, $150,000 payment to the Trump Foundation from a Ukrainian oligarch. But many are remembering that that same oligarch received payments from the Clinton Foundation, and that investigation seemed to go nowhere. Victor Pinchuk is this person's name. He gave tens of millions of dollars, in fact, to the Clinton Foundation. Mark Thiessen and Zach Buchanan weigh in next.
This is the most biased group of people. These people have the biggest conflicts of interest I've ever seen. They're not looking at the other side. They're not looking at the Hillary Clinton horrible things that she did and all of the crimes that were committed. They're not looking at all of the things that happened that everybody is very angry about, I can tell you, from the Republican side, and I think even the independent side. They only keep looking at us.
President Trump lashing out at special counsel Robert Mueller, saying that he is ignoring the Clinton scandals, among other things. And now Mueller's reportedly looking into a September of 2015 $150,000 donation to the Trump Foundation from a Ukrainian oligarch. But what's not being reported by many is that that very same oligarch, the largest individual contributor to the Clinton Foundation. Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. The man in question is 57-year-old Ukrainian steel magnate Victor Pinchuk, whose father-in-law was the president of Ukraine from 1994 to 2005. Pinchuk's $150,000 donation to the now defunct Trump Foundation was in exchange for Donald Trump speaking via video link to a 2015 business conference in Kiev. The donation was uncovered when the Robert Mueller investigation subpoenaed the Trump Organization. But legal experts are having trouble finding the bombshell in this revelation because, one, the speaking fee appears to be both legal and common, and two, it also runs counter to any Russian collusion argument, considering Victor Pinchuk is hostile to Vladimir Putin. And at the time of the payment, Donald Trump was still considered a long shot to win the GOP nomination, much less the presidency. Then there's the fact that Pinchuk considers himself a friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton and has given the Clinton Foundation up to $25 million, including $8.6 million while Mrs. Clinton was Secretary of State. The New York Times also reports that Pinchuk allowed the Clintons use of his private jet. And the payment from Pinchuk to Trump was solicited by former Clinton advisor and Fox News contributor Doug Schoen, who you may recall pulled his report from Hillary Clinton in 2016, saying her presidency would be hobbled with scandals like the email scandal, which, speaking of double standards, the American Spectator draws this parallel to the FBI's raid on Trump attorney Michael Cohen. Quoting here, Hillary Clinton and her chief minion, Cheryl Mills, claimed attorney-client privilege when Mills herself was under investigation for obstruction. And then classified emails showed up on Hillary's assistant's husband, Anthony Weiner's, computer, who is in prison for pornographic interaction with a minor online. Has the Clinton Foundation or Huma Abedin's home or Hillary's bathroom been no-knock raided yet? No. And as for the $150,000 payment from the Ukrainian oligarch to Trump, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz calls it a fake story. Martha.
Thank you, Trace. Here with more, Mark Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and a Fox News contributor, and Zach Buchanan, the former senior DNC advisor who worked on the Clinton campaign. Gentlemen, when you look at these two scenarios, what is abundantly clear is that these two situations have been treated completely differently. That Hillary Clinton was treated with kid gloves, and the investigation into Donald Trump is, a door-breaking down environment. Mark, and then Zach.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I will say at the outset that I don't think either the Trump Foundation or the Clinton Foundation should be taking money from oligarchs or from foreign businessmen, because it creates a conflict of interest inherently. So I don't think they should be taking this money. But you have to put this into perspective. Donald Trump took $150,000 for a speech to the Yalta Security Conference, which is a conference that this oligarch put on. The Clinton Foundation took in up to $25 million from the same oligarch. He flew Bill and Hillary Clinton around the world on his private jet. He invited Bill Clinton to a French ski resort for his 50th birthday. And by the way, he paid Bill and Hillary Clinton to speak at the exact same conference as Donald Trump. So how could it be a conflict for Donald Trump to have taken this money to speak at this conference when Bill and Hillary Clinton were paid to speak at the exact same conference?
Why, Zach, why are these two investigations treated so very differently?
So first off, I think you guys got to pick your story here. I mean, the original story from the White House was that they fired FBI Director James Comey because the FBI was too hard on Hillary Clinton. Now you guys are saying that Hillary Clinton was treated with kid gloves. You guys can't have it both ways. You got to pick one. She was either roasted over the coals, which is why FBI Director James Comey was fired, or she was kid. That is the official reason from the White House about why FBI Director James Comey was fired.
No, it was an overall mishandling that was outlined by Rod Rosenstein of a mishandling of the investigation.
It wasn't just mishandling. It was the fact, for example, the new IG report that's going to come out that shows that they were very, very hard on.
Very much looking forward to.
I'm very much looking forward to it because, for example, it shows.
Hopefully we'll answer some of these questions.
It shows that the FBI was very, very hard on Hillary Clinton. That's the only thing that's been leaked out of the IG report. And so I don't understand this. But in terms of this particular case, there are key differences between these donations. The one to the Trump Foundation, for example, was secret. The one to the Clinton Foundation was completely transparent. There was a press release sent out with it. It was listed on the website. The actual dollar amount was earmarked to go to Ukraine to fight HIV/AIDS that was there.
I hear what you're saying. And as Mark points out, perhaps neither one of these entities should have taken any money at all. It's $25 million for the Clinton Foundation, $150,000 for Trump. Maybe neither one should. But the point with where we're living right now in this month, Mark, is that this shows that there is a straying from this investigation into areas that it just makes you wonder what is Robert Mueller interested in that transaction, do you think?
I don't know, but we'll find out eventually. I mean, look, this is what happens when investigations start: is they start following trails and they see where they lead, and there may be nothing to this, or there may be something. But let's keep in mind also that there is an active FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation right now. It's not getting a lot of press attention, but it was restarted last year by the FBI because the Clinton Justice Department turned down requests by the FBI in 2016 to accelerate the investigation, and only after the election were they allowed to do it. So there's a very serious investigation into corruption and pay-to-play by the Clinton Foundation. And keep in mind that this oligarch, when he was giving money to the Clinton Foundation, it was while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. He had, according to the New York Times, he had more than a dozen meetings with senior Clinton State Department officials, and we know, thanks to Citizens United, who released her emails, that they were reporting back to her on their meetings with him in those emails. He had dinner with her at her home, and she lied about it. She said she never saw him once when she was Secretary of State, but then the emails came out that showed that he was on the guest list for a dinner at her home. And this is also while this guy was doing trade with Iran at a time when the United States was under sanctions, and he was in trouble with the Commerce Department for steel dumping in the United States. So there is a lot more serious things going on here with the Clinton Foundation than there's anything with $150,000 speech.
And as you point out, the investigation has been reopened. Zach, final thought goes to you.
I mean, look, I think that people need to get a new hobby. You guys beat Hillary Clinton. Nostrovia, I mean, it's time to move on. Go for a walk. Go get a massage. Do whatever you got to do to fill the void in your souls. But I understand why you're focusing on Hillary Clinton, because you cannot defend Donald Trump. But seriously, guys, it's getting a little sad.
So, Zach, do you think it's fair for the attorney's door to be knocked down in 4 places where he lived? Did you think that was a fair carrying out of this investigation?
I mean, he's being accused of some fairly serious criminal activity. And so, yes, I believe that criminals should have their doors knocked down if there is evidence that they are going to destroy evidence, which is the case here. So, yes, I mean, these guys are criminals.
Case closed. Case closed. All right, Zach, thank you very much. Good to see you, Mark. Good to have you both. All right, coming up next is Chinese President Xi responding to President Trump's actions on trade in a significant way that we haven't seen in a long time. and how the so-called trade war could hit some of the president's biggest supporters perhaps the hardest. A longtime soybean farmer gives us his take on how he feels about all of this. It's fascinating, and it is next. Chinese President Xi announcing a pretty big move. He says he will significantly cut his country's automobile import tariffs, which is something President Trump has been wanting very much. The news comes just hours after President Trump ramped up the rhetoric in the trade fight, tweeting this, quote, when a car is sent to the United States from China, there's a tariff to be paid of 2.5%. When a car is sent from China to China from the United States, the tariff is 25%. Does that sound like free or fair trade? No, he writes, it sounds like stupid trade, and it's been going on for years. Late this afternoon, President Trump tweeting that he's happy with the progress that is being made so far with China. So who stands to lose the most in the trade war between the United States and China? Some say it is American farmers, specifically soybean farmers, who reside largely in parts of the country that voted for President Trump in 2016. That is an intentional move on the part of the Chinese. What many Americans don't know is how much their livelihood depends on these soybean farmers who produce most of the feed used to raise chicken, pork, beef, fish, and other foods that we eat every day. Here now, David Rodebaugh, for a longtime soybean farmer who serves as director of the Indiana Soybean Alliance. It is good to have you with us tonight, David. Thank you very much. So as this stands now, what is the impact on you and farmers like you?
Martha, I might say, first of all, I do live in northwestern Indiana, and we farm with my three brothers and our families. We appreciate the chance to be with you this evening. Trade is really a big deal for us as farmers. We have the ability to raise abundant crops and good infrastructure to get these crops to market. And our grower organizations have worked very diligently to get the needs assessed of our customers around the world, and so we can produce and be a reliable supplier.
Sure. What's the impact of these tariffs on you? Tell us how you would be hurt by them, do you believe?
There is the potential that we would lose a great deal of our market. We do export a third of our beans to China, and so it's an extremely big deal for us.
Understood. Let me ask you one more question. Does it change how you feel about President Trump?
I think we are taking a wait-and-see attitude on that. We have a great amount of confidence in our Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, and trade is a difficult thing. There are many hurdles to cross. I have a lot of confidence in our governmental officials who are charged with doing that.
All right, David, we got to go, but thank you so much, and we appreciate you being here tonight. We hope you'll come back as this moves along and tell us what you're thinking down the road. Thank you, sir. All the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Quick break, and we'll be right back with more of the story.